Yo, nigga, Ja Rule on one. Yeah, it's our world. Please believe niggas ain't real. Please believe it's murder. Please believe.
The Fast and the Furious. Holy shit, how did we get here? See, who would have thought that something like The Fast and the Furious 16 years later after the first one came out would still be a big thing? We're getting our 8th movie in a couple of months. And because we're getting our 8th movie and because I wanted to add some older reviews to my channel, I'm going to be reviewing all the Fast and Furious movies, and I figured I'd start with the one that started it all. So this movie was directed by Rob Cohen. It came out in 2001. It stars the usual suspects: Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Paul Walker. Like I said, this movie was directed by Rob Cohen though, and I wanted to take a moment to shout out some of the unique directorial things that he did in this movie. This is a movie that was built around the premise of fast cars, fast women, you know, everything that a macho, testosterone-filled man would need. One of the first things I noticed upon rewatching this the other day is that the first 5-6 scenes in this movie easily all involve cars. It's one of those weird things where I had to actually go back and make sure that I was right, but like the first 5-6 scenes in this movie all involve people either driving or talking about or doing something involving cars. The movie starts out with a heist scene involving 3 really fast cars where they're hijacking a truck on the highway. The scene right after that is Brian, who we come to know as sort of the hero of this story. He's driving a really nice looking car and he's trying to test how fast it's going. The very next scene after that, when he first runs into Mia at the deli and he's flirting with her or whatever, and then Dom and his crew show up, they're all showing up in really nice, expensive looking fast cars. You kind of get the theme going here. And for a movie that's predicated on street racing and about the excitement and the adrenaline rush of driving cars really fast, I thought that was an interesting little directorial choice, is that the first 6 scenes of this movie all involve cars in some way, shape, or form. Another thing I noticed about this movie is that the way they transition between night and day in this movie is kind of different. The way that they transition between night and day, or a couple of hours in a day followed by night, or a day to day or whatever, is they had like that speed up thing. Like they would show a shot of the sky and then they would just show clouds, the moon and stars and a whole bunch of stuff just flashing forward really fast, and then it would just kind of look like time was just speeding up. Now, he did that repeatedly throughout this movie, and in most other movies, I could say that that might be a little directorial choice that might irritate me. But again, following with the theme of fast, 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 speed, 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 I kind of like that little directorial nugget. It's just a little thing that I noticed. You also notice that 30 minutes into this movie, you don't really know where the story is going. You mean there's this scrappy white kid named Brian Spiller. Where the hell did they come up with that name for an undercover? He's obviously into Mia because Mia's hot, and then he meets Dom and his crew, and then he gets into a race with Dom. The first race with Dom and Brian is kind of memorable, if only because some of the CGI is a little bit dated. I mean, they have to do this thing where the cars are going like absurdly fast, and obviously everything around the car just looks like a green screensaver or something, but it's really memorable for how the race ends. Well, the race ends and then we get, you know, Brian's whole "I almost had you" kind of thing, and then Dom is like, "Me? You almost had me?" It's one of those moments in Fast and Furious. It's like one of those little moments sprinkled throughout these movies that just kind of turns iconic without meaning to. We finally, 35 minutes into the movie, get the semblance of story. We find out that Brian is undercover and that there's been a series of heists on these trucks with really expensive equipment and electronics going missing. Yeah, it's obviously no shit that Dom and his crew are the ones that have been hijacking these trucks, and so Brian has to go undercover, and it's the typical tale of he's undercover and he gets a little bit too close to the people that he's going undercover with. At first they go, well, it's just because of Mia. You know, he just cares about Mia, but then you sort of realize this friendship develops between him and Dom, and you sort of realize why Dom is the way he is, and you realize why Brian is the way he is. I mean, he's a cop, but he's a guy that feels conflicted because he does love that fast life. He does love that sort of dirty criminal underworld, and you can tell that he probably came from a lot of those places. Dom is just one of those ultimate tough guy macho dudes. I mean, he's just toughness personified. He's the ultimate leader. But really the thing about Dom, and this is accentuated in a brilliant scene later on in the movie where Brian and Dom are having a conversation in a garage about Dom's father and how Dom's father died. You really do get the sense that Dom is incredibly loyal. Like, he values loyalty over anything else. It's death before dishonor for Dom. It's a quality that I can kind of relate to. I can really appreciate that kind of loyalty. It's how I do things with my friends and people that I'm close to in my life. I mean, everybody would want to be Dom in this movie. He's the leader, he's got money, he's got a good crew, he's got a really, really hot ass girlfriend. But guys, I'm well aware that Michelle Rodriguez has the acting range of a teaspoon, but I don't care. I don't care. She's really hot. She's she's a bad girl, and I need a bad girl in my life. I just have a soft spot in my heart for bad girls. What can I say? Dom's a lucky bastard, man. I'm just gonna say that. Obviously, over the course of the story, I mean, there's a lot of car racing and stuff like that. And one thing I also noticed upon rewatch is that the car races in the next few movies are a lot more elaborate and a lot more tricked out than the races in this one. I mean, the racing in this one is pretty straightforward. It's pretty much, you know, drive in a straight line. It's kind of like the 40 or 60 yard dash for cars, basically. You just drive to a certain point, and then whoever is at that point first wins. In the next few movies after this, it's like, you know, you have to drive to a certain point, and then you have to start doing a whole bunch of turns and zigzags and stuff. The racing does evolve as the movies go on, which is another cool element. There's a lot of standout sequences, and I will say that the driving and the racing and the stunt work for some of these sequences are really well helmed. In particular, there is a really suspenseful, awesome highway chase scene involving this trucker where Dom and his crew are trying to get the heist, but then they just didn't count on this guy in the front seat being an insanely good shot with a shotgun, shoots Vince, and then Vince gets his arm stuck on the trucker, and it's just a really great scene. Brian and Mia have to show up at the end in another really fast car to save the day, and they have to jump back and forth between the truck. Shit was really awesome. Then we get that iconic final race between Dom and Brian where they're just, at this point, Dom knows that he's a cop. Side note, I really like the moment where he figures out that he's a cop. Like, I like the fact where Vince is dying and then he has to call in some help, and then he's like, hey, this is Officer Brian, blah, blah, blah. I need help. He's got a gunshot wound and blah, blah, blah. I love the subtle little way the score changes and Dom looks at him. He's like, you son of a bitch. And the music is like, you son of a bitch. Okay, it's not exactly like that, but you get what I'm saying. The music changes because Dom changes, but at the point, Vince is dying, so we can't really do anything about it. I would say there's a little bit of a lull after that first race, and we get more into the story, and you get why they have to kind of feature these characters a little bit more, and they have to slow the story down a little bit. And I will say that of the Fast and Furious movies, this one is probably the most grounded and probably the most serious. I mean, it has the most serious moments. Having said that, it's a movie that doesn't try to take itself too seriously, and I can appreciate that quality to it. It's not a great movie. It's not a movie that is gonna go on my top 10 whatever list. As far as pure adrenaline fun, this movie was pretty awesome. Mostly because I like the characters, and mostly because I like hot women in cars. What do you want from me, okay? Sometimes you can just go to a movie and you can just turn your brain off, so to speak, and as long as the characters are fun and the story is somewhat easy to follow, you can have a good time with this thing. I'll also say that some of those Fast and Furious cliches, they first emerged in this one. Vince doesn't show up again until, I think, Fast 5, I think is when he shows up again. We also see that cliche where Dom is sitting around with his family at the table, and if somebody reaches in first, well, you're gonna have to say grace now. You see that again in future movies. We see the big crowds, I mean, the hot women walking around and stunting for the racers. I mean, we see a lot of the Fast and Furious cliches are obviously born right here in this one. Guys, I'm gonna put this one on the high end of Man of Steel. It gets a Silver Age medal for me. Alright guys, that is my review for the Fast and the Furious. Stay tuned, I'm gonna have a review for Too Fast, Too Furious sometime in the very near future. I don't have a date for it, just wait on it. So let me know, what was your favorite moment about the Fast and the Furious, and is the Fast and the Furious your personal favorite of the series? Be sure to like and subscribe to the show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.
Like a punk, before we put you in the trunk, you going dun 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 dun. Or I go wild like the hill with my hand on the pump and go dun 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 dun. Fuck it, we getting drunk and smoking that skunk. I'm going dun 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 dun.